Okay. Okay, before I start recording, I do want to mention one other thing, that here in Israel, because we're, depending where you are, we're many hours before you. One second. Okay, before I start recording, I do want to mention one other thing, that here, just one second. In Israel, because we're, depending where you are, we're many hours before you. One second. Okay, before I start recording, I do want to mention one other thing, that here, just one second. In Israel, because we're, depending where you are, we're many hours before you. One second. Okay, before I start recording, I do want to mention one other thing, that here, just one second. In Israel, because we're, depending where you are, we're many hours before you. Okay, thank you, Ephraim, as always. I forgot to look at something. Okay, before I start recording, I just want to mention that here in Israel, we're starting the 10th day of Shvat. The 10th day of Shvat is a very, very big day in Chabad for two reasons. One, it's the yurtzeit of the Frierdiker Rebbe, the past Rebbe's father-in-law, the Frierdiker Rebbe, who died in 1950. And exactly a year, on the 10th of Shvat, exactly a year later, Menachem Mendel Schneerson, his son-in-law, became Rebbe. Exactly a year later, on the 10th of Shvat. So in Chabad, that's a very, very big day, because the Frierdiker Rebbe was a giant of a spiritual person. And of course, the Rebbe, in his over 40 years of leading Chabad, created a spiritual empire all over the world. Chabad is everywhere. And these two Rebbes are really responsible for it. So I did want to mention that this is the 10th of Shvat, and a very, very important day. Okay, welcome everyone to a new series. This is part of Fundamentals of Kabbalah and Hasidut. Last week, we finished the introduction to, well, actually 2 weeks ago, we finished the introduction to Maaseh Bereshit. Last week, we did a one-time class on the month of Shvat, which, of course, is still very appropriate, as we are really still just beginning the month of Shvat. Tonight, we begin a new series, and I have to say I'm very happy that I see that David just came on, is because it was his suggestion of the subject that I chose for the next series. To be very honest, I can't even tell you how long the series is going to last. It's one of those things that could be just a few weeks, or it could turn into a few months. I am kind of poring over all of my research to try to determine how long. But the reason I decided to start it now is because it's connected to Tu B'Shvat. And the series is going to be called The Spiritual Geography of the Land of Israel. Pretty, hopefully fascinating, hopefully got your interest. The Spiritual Geography of the Land of Israel. I don't remember what we were learning, but it obviously was something to do with the land of Israel. And David from Akron said, I guess in the discussion, it would really be a great idea to do the geography of the land of Israel from a spiritual perspective. And so I kind of took it in, and that is what we're going to do. Like I said, it works perfectly because next week, next Sunday night and Monday is Tu B'Shvat, and this is all about the land of Israel. Tu B'Shvat it's the New Year of Trees, and it's all over the world, but it's centered in Eretz Yisrael. So let me describe for you what I want to try to accomplish tonight. As many of you may know, lately I've been taking the different series of classes that we're doing and turning them into books. And so when I thought of this idea of the spiritual geography of the land of Israel, I then thought of the spiritual geography and the holiness of the land of Israel. But then I went back and I looked at our videos, which anyone can, and I invite you to do this on YouTube. We actually did a few years ago a 4-part series on the holiness of the land of Israel. And so I realized I don't want to just repeat what I already gave over in that series. And again, I invite anyone to see this series of 4 classes. I think it's particularly fascinating and relevant. And so when thinking about the spiritual geography, what I want to do is I'm going to leave the whole concept of the holiness of the land and only concentrate on the spiritual geography of the land of Israel. When I finish this series, hopefully at some point, I'm going to put these 2 series together in order to create a book, because they go together. So this is what I want to explain, is I'm going to be confining what we're learning here quite literally to the geography of Eretz Yisrael. And I want to explain what that means. In other words, we're not going to try to attempt to take different stories in the Tanakh and discuss where they happened. That's not the purpose here. The purpose here is to understand the geography of Eretz Yisrael, and most importantly, its spiritual significance. Therefore, if there is an incident that happens in the Tanakh and it's connected to a geographical factor, then we will talk about it. This is not like a history class about the land of Israel, what happened in different places, but it is an attempt to understand the geography of the land and its effect on different events that happened and many, many other things. Now, of those things, there are 3 that will be connected to the geography, and that is agriculture, the fruits of Eretz Yisrael, and the whole idea of rain and water. Now, why that goes with geography is simply because depending on a geography of a certain country or state or area, that will determine what kind of agriculture happens, if any. So in other words, according to the geography of the land of Israel, that affects the fruits, the trees, and the agriculture that is happening there. And this, of course, has a very, very big part of the Torah and the Tanakh. Along with that is the idea, the same thing with rain. Depending on whether a country is arid or humid or gets a lot of rain, this affects everyone's lifestyle and it affects what happens, and it's connected to the geography. So therefore, if you have a country in the north of Africa, so most of those countries are desert, the Sahara. And so therefore the fruits, the trees, the rainfall is affected by that geography. So we are going to put all of that together. Again, geography, agriculture, which implies, of course, rain, trees, fruits. And then we're also going to connect various holidays to the agricultural cycle of the year, which again is dependent on the geography. So all of this, I'm not going to be repeating, but this is the, let's call it the foundation of what we're going to try to understand here. So where I want to start, and we have to start somewhere, is the very important idea of where the land of Israel is situated in the world. We see this on a map, but obviously the map is just a reflection of the world. And so where we start from is the idea that the land of Israel is quite literally in what we call the center of the world. Now, this is especially true until, let's say, 600 years ago, when, at least in Europe, Asia, and Africa, became aware that there is a North America and a South America and an Antarctica and perhaps Australia. In other words, in what we'll call the old world, that consisted of Europe, Asia, and Africa. And Israel is quite literally in the center of those three continents. And therefore, its importance in ancient times was that it was the crucial passing place of the trade routes. You know, as if you wanted to go from Europe to Asia, okay, there's a number of ways to go, but the most known or the most typical was coming through Israel. The same thing from Africa to Asia or Africa to Europe. So any discussion of the geography of the land of Israel, this is the most important thing, that it is in the middle of the world. There are many ancient maps that they have there in museums that show these three continents, and they show the land of Israel is like highlighted as being in the middle. This is one of the reasons, even beyond religion. Religion, of course, plays a very, very big part of this. But even with religion put to the side, everyone wanted to control the land of Israel for economic purposes. And then when you introduce religion, the three major monotheist religions all have their basis here in the Holy Land. From Judaism comes Christianity, and then later comes Islam. It's all centered here in Israel. That's why to this day, Jerusalem especially is the spiritual capital of the world. And so here we see from a geographic point of view, why is Israel so important? Because whether we're going to talk about trade routes or religion, or in modern times, oil, because the Arab world for around a century now has been call it the headquarters of the energy in the world. It's changing, by the way. It's not the same anymore. But there was a time, if you remember, in the 1973 war, when America was supporting Israel, there was an embargo of oil on America. And America at that point was almost completely dependent on Arab oil. And so economically, religiously, politically, you open any paper in the world, and almost invariably, Israel is on the first page. Not just now, from its inception, 70, what is it now? 70, I lost track. 1948. So it's we're in the 77th year. We're approaching the 78th year. Israel has just been in the headlines constantly. And this speaks a lot about, again, connected to the geography, that it is in the center of the world. And from this, we can understand when God tells Avram to leave your home, your father's house, and your birthplace, and come to the place that I will show you. Ela makom asher areka. So we could ask, maybe with a little humor, God couldn't have given us like a little bigger place, maybe someplace in the tropics with beautiful weather and scenery and everything. Why Israel? Because it's clear from that verse, Ela makom asher areka, go to the place that I will show you. God had already chosen this land for Abraham, knowing that from Abraham would come the Jewish people, and from the Jewish people, they would be the light unto the nations. And God specifically chose this place. And so we see that, actually we'll see it even more later tonight, that God's choice of the Holy Land was very purposeful. And again, and just according to the simple understanding, it was because of the geography, where it was in the world, that if the Jewish people were going to influence the whole world, it makes sense that they would be geographically situated in the middle. Okay, now in just 5 minutes, we will revisit this many times. I'm assuming most people have either come to Israel or read about Israel or seen maps of Israel or movies about Israel. But what I want to do in just a few minutes is just give the basic outline of the geography of Israel. And that is, if we can imagine, I'll try to do this graphically, that along the Mediterranean, from the north of Israel to where the land curves towards Israel. That's where Gaza is. Where Gaza is where the land curves, and the Negev comes down like this. But from around right by, well, today we'll call Ashkelon and Ashdod, all the way up to the tip of Israel now, at least, is Rosh HaNikra. It's on the Mediterranean. So this is a very, very important fact about Israel, is that a good part of the country is situated on the Mediterranean Sea. Almost that whole area from Rosh HaNikra all the way down to Ashdod and Ashkelon there's around 15 kilometers of plains. It's flat. That's where a lot of agriculture today happens in Israel. And the majority of the population of Israel lives in the plains, the Shvela, meaning the flatlands. And of course, Tel Aviv and all of the call it the suburbs around Tel Aviv are all situated in the plains. And then the land starts to ascend. And it goes all the ways up to where Yerushalayim is. And then from Yerushalayim, there's a steep drop all the ways down to the Jordan River and the Dead Sea. Now then there it becomes flat again. So from all the ways down to Eilat, all the ways up to the northern border, it is also flat. Up north, that's called the Hula Valley. And then it descends to where Yam Kinneret is, the Sea of Galilee. And then the Jordan, again, it all becomes a plain again, all the ways down to the Dead Sea. And from the Dead Sea, all the ways down to Eilat. So the land is, obviously I'm simplifying this, is like this. And along this ridge is called like the spine of the country. And here you have three of the major cities that play a part. I see Bracha is holding up a map there. That's very good, Bracha. That three of the major cities that play such an important part are on the spine, the top of the mountain. And that is Hebron in the south, Yerushalayim, and Shechem. These three cities all sit at the top of the spine of the country. I'll just add two more things. Again, this is just very basic. Around 40% of the country of modern Israel is what's called the Negev Desert. And this is a real desert. The northern Negev has been turned into a wondrous agricultural place. And down by Eilat also, again, the surroundings are very, very deserty and very rocky. But if anyone's been to Eilat, the southern tip of Israel, for about 30 kilometers, again, in the valley, because on the other side, I should mention, is once you get to the lower place, Yam Kinneret, the Jordan, the Dead Sea, all the ways down to Eilat. So on the other side, start the mountains again. This is where Jordan is. And these are the ancient peoples of Moab, Edom, Ammon, all of that. So it's kind of like this, and then down here it begins up again. This is very, very general, but 40% of the country is in desert. But as I was saying, around 30 kilometers north of Eilat has been turned into the most amazing agricultural wonder, because it really is, for thousands of years, no one grew anything there. And now it's full of greenery, hothouses, plantations of trees, vegetables. It's actually incredible. And this, of course, was prophesied by the prophets, that in the future, one second, I'm just trying to let someone in here. I hope they got in. Yes, they got in. Okay. This was prophesied by the prophets, that in the end of days, before Mashiach comes, one of the main signs would be that the land would turn fruitful again. And we see it today. It's quite amazing, really quite amazing. And then just to finish, so the whole 40% of the southern part of the country is very desert-like, mountainous. And yet, little by little, those prophecies are coming true. You could be going, let's say, drive 10 kilometers in the Negev, and all of a sudden, you'll come upon a settlement with a huge vineyard in the middle of the desert, or a plantation of date palms. And then you go past it and more desert. So little by little, the Negev is being turned into, like I said, an agricultural wonder. Up north is very mountainous and hilly. And this goes all the way into Lebanon. In other words, where the border of Israel is today is not a natural border. Like many countries, their border is because there's a major river there, or there is a major valley or something that is an obvious demarcation between countries. Where Israel ends, at least on the map today, and where Lebanon starts, it's just a continuation. You wouldn't know it. The topography is exactly the same. And so I should mention that in ancient times, what we call southern Lebanon, and even probably half of Lebanon, was a part of Israel. Of course, the country of Lebanon is a more or less a figment of between World War I and World War II, when they just carved up the map in Africa, in the Arab countries, which is the source of so many problems in the world, is that the way countries were formed by people sitting in usually a smoke-filled room with maps and magic markers, making countries by putting together different peoples, different languages, different religions, different countries. And now everything is, as it were, sacred. Everything is supposed to be where these lines were set, mostly around the end of World War II. I think it's known that the Balfour Declaration in 1919, 1920, the Jewish homeland was to contain all of what's today Jordan. That was considered the Jewish homeland. Of course, that's not how it turned out. Jordan, Saudi Arabia, all of these countries were just created by different political whims and based on economics and money and all of that. That's a whole other discussion. Okay, so here I tried in very short to just give a feeling about the land of Israel. The rest of the class tonight, we are going to be looking at the Torah portion of Ekev in the book of Devarim. Parshat Ekev is the third parsha in the book of Deuteronomy. And there are three different parts of this parsha that are very connected to the spiritual geography of the land of Israel. So I am going to read two of them and translate. I'll tell you, anyone who wants to follow what chapter and verse. And this is where we're going to start, because here we have two very, very important and unique descriptions of the land of Israel. Throughout the Torah, the land isn't described. In Parshat Masei, we have a description of the borders. This is one subject we're not going to get into deeply because I already did this in this other series about the holiness of Eretz Yisrael, a whole discussion of the borders and the changing borders of Eretz Yisrael. But other than that, except for the land of Israel being described as Eretz Zavat Chalav Udavash, a land flowing with milk and honey. This term is repeated many, 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 many times in the Torah, but it doesn't really describe what is the land like. But it's said it's this land flowing with milk and honey. We should know that the milk we're talking about is not cow milk. It was more sheep and goat milk. And the honey is not bee honey. It's date honey, tamar. But in Parshat Ekev, there are two descriptions of the land of Israel. And so, since this is our first class about the spiritual geography, I wanted to begin here. So for those who want to follow, we are in the 8th chapter of the book of Devarim, Deuteronomy, 8th chapter. And I'm going to be starting on Pasuk Zayin, the 7th verse. Again, 8th chapter, 7th verse. So it says like this: Ki Hashem Elokecha mevi'echa el eretz tova. That God, your God, is bringing you. This is Moshe's last speech to the people. The whole book of Devarim happens in 37 days. The last 37 days of Moshe's life, and he is preparing the people to enter into the land of Israel. We're at the end of the 40 years in the desert, and Moshe is priming the people to come into the land. So that's the context. So it says again, because Hashem, your God, is bringing you into a good land, Eretz Nachalei Mayim, a land of streams of water, Ayanot utahomot yotzim bika ubahar, and springs and underground water that rise up in the valleys and the mountains. Eretz chita usara v'gefen uteina v'rimon eretz zeit shemen udvash. This is an extremely important verse in the Torah, which has many things associated with it. A land of wheat and barley and grapes and figs and pomegranates, a land of olive oil and honey. Again, the honey here is date honey. So these are the 7 fruits of Eretz Yisrael. And of course, as I said before, they grow here because of the topography, because of the geography. More on this to come. And again, this is perfect before Tu B'Shvat, because on Tu B'Shvat, we actually try to eat as many of these fruits as we can, along with many other fruits. But it's especially to try to eat the fruits of Eretz Yisrael. Okay, we continue with the 9th verse. Eretz asher lo b'miskenut tochal ba lechem, lo techsar kol ba. It's a long sentence, so I'll just translate up to there. It's a land that lacks nothing. It lacks nothing, and you will eat bread without lacking. Okay, I'm trying to translate it in a more spiritual way. I'm going to do it more the simple way. It's a land where you will eat bread without poverty. You will lack nothing there. But you could read it differently. And you could read it that you will eat bread without any lacking. Nothing is lacking because everything is in it. Kol ba, everything is in it. The verse continues, Eretz asher avneha barzel, it's a land that its rocks are iron, umeharareha taksov nechoshet, and from its mountains you will mine copper. V'achalta v'savata u'barachta, and you will eat, and you will be satisfied, and you will bless. Et Hashem Elokecha ala oretz atova asher natan lach, and you will bless God your God on the land, on the good land that He is giving you. So this is this passage in the Parsha of Ekev, and it's not a very embellished description. Nonetheless, it's more than we have anyplace else. So here we see, first of all, the idea, and it will be repeated in the second thing I'm going to read you, the idea of valleys and mountains. And that's what I was trying to explain before when I gave this little description of the land, where you have these valleys and mountains, and then on the other side, it rises up again. And so, especially up north, of course, where it becomes hilly and mountainous, so you have valleys and mountains all over the place. But here, the Torah is telling us it's not a desert, it's not the tropics, it's not flat. It's telling us it's a land of valleys and mountains. And we'll see the importance of that when we come to the agriculture. And here, of course, we have the 7 fruits of Eretz Yisrael, which of course are very, very important. And the last verse is V'yachalta v'savata v'rachta. This is part of our benching, our grace after meals, every time we eat bread, because here it's mentioned that you will eat bread and be satisfied. And so it's included every time we eat bread, we include this verse. V'yachalta v'savata u'v'rachta et Hashem Elokecha al ha'oretz asher hatova asher natan lach. But even more than that, what's very significant here, we have a tradition that we say 100 blessings a day. 100 blessings a day. Someone might say, impossible. It's like, no way. But if you realize that the majority of them happen in the 3 prayer services, especially the Amidah. The Amidah, also called the Shmona Esrei, it used to have 18 blessings, now it has 19. So 19 times 3 is already 57 blessings, just in the Amidah. If you look at the rest of prayers, you add another 10 or 15. Every time you eat or drink, you're making a blessing. Every time you eat and drink, you're making an after blessing. Every time you go to the bathroom, you are making a blessing. So you get 100 blessings. But there is only one blessing that is mandated by the Torah. All the others are from the rabbis. And what is that one blessing? This one right here. V'yachalta v'savata u'berachta. You will eat and you will be satisfied and you will bless. And so only the after blessing, after eating food, is mandated from the Torah. All of the blessings in prayer are from the rabbis. Going to the bathroom, saying a blessing before you eat is also from the rabbis. So this obviously is a very important verse here, and it's connected to Ala Eretz HaTova, the good land. Okay, now we're still in Parshat Ekev, but now we're in chapter 11. And we're in verse 8. And it starts like this. It's like an introduction. Ushmartem et kol mitzvah asher anochi mitzavcha hayom. Moshe again is talking to the people, saying, and you shall guard all of the, it really means in the plural, mitzvot that I am commanding you today. Laman techazku ubatem v'rishtem et ha'aretz. In order that you will become strong and come in and inherit et ha'aretz asher atem ovrim shama, the land that you are going to be crossing over there to possess it. Ulaman tarichu yamim al adama asher nishba Hashem lavotechem letet lehem ulezaram eretz zavat chalav udavash. In order that you will be able to lengthen your days on the land that God promised to your patriarchs and matriarchs to give to them and their children, a land flowing with milk and honey. Again, this is one of many times that it says milk and honey. Now here, we're going to see a very, very important concept. And that is that our ability to stay on the land is tied to our fulfilling the laws of the Torah. This is made clear throughout the book of Devarim. Here it says it very clearly. In other words, if you want to lengthen your days in the land, it will be done by fulfilling the mitzvah. Now, here's the part I really wanted to get to. Continuing on verse 10. Ki ha'oretz asher ata ba shama l'rishta, lo ke'eretz Mitzrayim hi, asher yitzata misham, asher tizra et zaracha, v'hishkata b'raglecha k'gana yarak. The land that you are going to possess, it is not a land like Egypt, that you came out of there, that you would sow seeds and you would water them with your feet like a garden of vegetables. So the question is, what is this talking about? And so the explanation is Egypt, and you could look at, anyone who could look at a picture taken from space. So you'll see Egypt is a very, very big country. It's all brown, except along the Nile River. 95% of the country is desert, but along the Nile, to this day, nothing has changed. It's green. How did they used to have agriculture? They made channels, and they had water wheels that they would operate with their feet. And they would bring water from the Nile, and they would do their farming. But obviously, it was very close to the Nile. Today, obviously, they can bring it a little bit farther through modern technology. But in the old days, literally, they would water their crops by their feet. They would bring the water by their feet. So the Torah is saying here, your land is not like that. And it continues, but the land that you are coming into to possess, Rishta Eretz Harim Ubekaot Lamatar Shamayim Tishtem. But you are coming to a land of mountains and valleys that are watered by the rain of heaven, will water the mountains and the valleys. Eretz Asher Hashem Elokecha. Now this verse is also one of the most important in the entire Torah. Eretz Asher Hashem Elokecha Doresh Ota Tamid. Einei Hashem Elokecha Ba Mereshit Hashana Li'ad Acharit Shana. A land that God seeks out always. The eyes of God are on it from the beginning of the year until the end of the year. Now, what do we learn from this? So we learn many things, but one is this is the source of Rosh Hashanah being a day of judgment. Because in the Torah, when it describes Rosh Hashanah, all it says it's Yom Teruah. It's a day of blowing the shofar. It doesn't tell us why we're blowing the shofar. What's the purpose? It says nothing about judgment. So how do they learn this whole thing of Rosh Hashanah is the day of judgment? Anytime in the Torah, when it uses the expression, the eyes of God, it means divine providence. God is ruling over the world. God is involved in the world. God is part of the world. God is running things either directly or indirectly. The eyes of God. And that includes judgment. Things are happening because of what we've discussed many times, a measure for measure. Mida keneged mida. And only God has the accounting of why things happen. What's the balance? What's the accounting? And here it says that God's eyes are on it from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. That's where we receive the oral tradition, what Rosh Hashanah really is. And this, of course, is this idea that the whole year is judged on Rosh Hashanah, because it says from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. The other part that is more connected to what we're trying to learn here about the geography is we started the class today with the idea that Israel is in the middle of the world. It's the center of the world, that God purposely chose this land because of that. And because we then made this our homeland, and because of the influence that the Jewish people have had on the entire world, it continues to be the center of the world. As we described before, for such a small country with such a small population to be the center of so much of daily politics, economics. And I'll mention another thing today, that for all practical purposes, Israel has become the Silicon Valley of the world. The research and the discoveries that are happening here on almost a daily basis, whether it's in communications, agriculture, medicine, computers, security, military, whatever it is, Israel's the center of the world now, as far as these kind of advances. It's not the only place it's happening, just like Silicon Valley wasn't the only place it's happening. But every large company that's based in Silicon Valley now has a research center here in Israel. Every one of them. Every one of them. And so here, this verse says that God's eyes are on the land constantly. So Rashi explains, he brings a verse from Job, where it implies that God is looking at the whole world. Now, of course, God is looking at the whole world. He's looking at the whole universe, the whole cosmos simultaneously. But Rashi says maybe this is a contradiction. Here it says that God is looking always at the land of Israel. So Rashi explains it's just like when a person looks straight ahead, they also see peripherally. It's not like they only see what they're looking at. They see also around them. So Rashi explains that is how God's providence is working. God's focus is always on the land of Israel. And from there, it encompasses the entire universe. We're going to see later, when we talk about the four holy cities, that the place of the temple is over what's called the Even Shtia, the foundation stone. And according to tradition, this is quite literally the center of the entire universe, is the foundation stone. What is over the foundation stone? That's where the temple was. And more specifically, what is over the foundation stone was the Holy of Holies. So this idea that we've been developing this whole class of Israel being in the center of the world is on every level, whether it's from the trade routes to religion, to politics, to oil, and to understanding, call it the ultimate cosmology. Israel is in the center. And this verse, that God's eyes are on it, is that divine providence is centered in Israel and then radiates out to the entire world. Now, just to finish Akev, is the very next verse in chapter 11, verse 13, begins, and we won't have time to read the whole thing. This is the second passage of the Shema. Every day we say the Shema as part of the morning prayers and the evening prayers. Along with Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, we have three passages. One comes from the previous portion of the Et Hanan. That is, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. This right here in Parshat Akev is the second passage. And the third comes from the book of Bamidbar, is about tzitzit, about the fringes. And the reason that's included is because it ends with the idea of coming out of Egypt. And it's a mitzvah in the Torah to mention and be aware of coming out of Egypt every single day. So in a nutshell, what is this second passage about? And so what it says is, if you listen to the mitzvot of Hashem, I'm paraphrasing this. If you listen to the mitzvot of Hashem and you do them, and you love God with your whole heart and your soul, I will give you the rain in your land in its right time, the early rain and the later rain. And you will gather in your grains and your oils and your vineyards, and I will give you grasses in your field for your animals, and you will eat and you will be satisfied. Remember, early in the parsha, we had the same thing. You will eat and you'll be satisfied and you will bless. And then it says, though, beware, though, if you turn away from God, you turn away from the mitzvot, then God will shut up the heavens, and there will be no rain, and you will have no produce, and you will really be exiled very quickly from the good land that God has given you. And then it continues that you should put this idea on your heart, and you should listen to it, and you should put it on your doorposts and tefillin and all of that. So, but what I want to get to here is the connection with rain. Because remember, it says your land is not like Egypt. In other words, you don't have this mammoth river running through that. From that river, you'll be able to do all the agriculture that you want. But what we just learned is that the way water works in Israel is dependent on the rain. And the rain is dependent on our following the Torah. This is something that we'll have to develop because we're getting towards the end of the class. But the idea of water and rain has been mentioned already twice in the two descriptions. It made sure that we know that the way of survival. Now remember, today things are very different. In the old days, if you didn't have water, you die. Simple as that is. You don't drink, you have no food, and you die. They couldn't truck water. They couldn't through pipes bring water hundreds of kilometers away. Either you had a source of water near you, or you could not survive. And that's why all over Israel, they found, I mean, just in my quote neighborhood, there's scores of wells, ancient wells that were dug in order that when the rainy season comes, you have to save that water or you'll have nothing during the dry season. During the dry season, there's no water for 6 months. If you happen to live near a spring or a river, you're okay. But all over Israel, including the place that I live, the place that I live has no natural water here. There's no natural water. And so either you could save the water during the rainy season, or you simply couldn't survive there. There'd be no way to survive. It's possible that there is a neighboring city, and you could, like in the old days, you could take your donkey and go 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers, and fill up your water jugs and bring them back. But you can imagine, how are you going to grow anything? How are you going to bathe? All of that. So here, tonight, we've seen that Israel is dependent on rain to this day. And this is even in the modern age where Israel, and hopefully we'll get to this, is a world leader of desalinated water. Per capita, it is the leader. It has more plants desalinating water than any place in the world. In fact, 50% of all drinking water now comes from desalinated water. But we're still dependent on the rain. Why? Right now, the Kinneret is 4 meters under its capacity. This is what we'll call a bad scene. And that's because this year, in the rest of Israel, no one can figure this out quite yet. It has been a very rainy winter, extremely rainy, but not up north. The north has gotten some rain, but almost all the rain has been in the center or the south of the country. Floods every other week. Most places have already gotten well over 100% of their usual allotment. But up north to this day, so the Kinneret is suffering. And in fact, they are piping desalinated water into the Kinneret because if it falls under a certain level, certain bacteria start to form. And once that happens, then it's really a bad scene. So they're actually pumping water from the Mediterranean into the Kinneret just to keep it above the lower level that it can't fall. So tonight we began our new series the spiritual geography of the land of Israel. I only touched on many of the ideas that we are going to explore, and I just hope that everyone found it interesting and fascinating. We'll continue to come, and we'll tell others to join. And Bezrat Hashem, as we see the land turning green and fruitful, that Mashiach will not be far behind. Be'ezrat Hashem.
I just have a quick question.